control something.
Okay, we're good to go, Mark.
All right, I'll bring the annual meeting of the Public Records Advisory Council to order. Today is Friday, November 5th at approximately 10:07 a.m. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. We have a pretty aggressive agenda, and as I mentioned earlier, because it is Friday, I always try to wrap these things up in advance so that you can get on with your important work in lives. So I'd like to just do an agenda check before we begin. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at that. And if there are any suggested changes, additions, we'd love to hear them at this time. All right. Well, with that, oh yeah, and Todd, thank you. Todd did update the agenda yesterday. We had to make a minor tweak here and there. So thank you for doing that, Todd. All right, I will gather then that the agenda is sufficient and we're ready to proceed. Agenda item number 1, overview of the Public Records Advisory Council's activities over the last year, including the 2024 biennial report. I hope folks had an opportunity to take a brief look at the report. I composed that earlier in the month, and I had Yufang as well as Shasta review the report. And I'll just make a note that Shasta, our vice chair, won't be able to join us today. She did give Todd and myself heads up in advance that she would not be able to join us. So just want to let that be known for the record. So the draft annual report is largely in the form and style that our previous 2 biennial reports have taken. It provides an introduction as well as the duties of the Public Records Advisory Council. And then it lists the council members. And one thing that we haven't quite done yet, I don't know if it's on the updated one on the web page, Todd, but do you include the new members since 2022 on that? I'm looking at my draft. Okay, good. I didn't pick the one.
Will has actually been the only one who's joined us since then. And so rather than making a separate section, I put next to his name in the list that he joined us after the last report.
Great. Thank you for doing that. I just wanted to recognize who the new folks were, Will. And so I've included that information, or we included that information. Let me see where my documents are. There we go. And then I went into a rather lengthy summary of the legislative subcommittee's work, the direction that I was given when we presented Senate Bill 417 to the Senate Rules Committee. As you'll recall, we were directed at that time due to opposition from largely government entities. The chair of the Rules Committee directed myself and the lobbyists from the Society of Professional Journalists to convene a work group to try to find common ground on a proposal to reduce fees in the public records. I will tell you that those discussions are continuing, and we should have an idea, hopefully fairly soon, whether or not we can reach an agreement. We're sort of getting at a critical stage in those discussions. I will tell you that the group has been meeting on a weekly basis since, Todd, remind me. I mean, we've been going at this since, God, it seems like March, right? Maybe.
Yes, it's all kind of hazy, but I think so.
Yeah, it's been rough, but we may be making progress. So I I will just keep my fingers crossed. And then, of course, we discussed in the report the process by which we reappointed the public records advocate. As you may recall, folks, we had to essentially create some bylaws that would guide us in the process of the reappointment or hiring of a public records advocate. Of course, we, with the leadership of Scott Stauffer, compose some bylaws on the process by which we would review, recruit, and hire the public records advocate. We adopted those bylaws and then went through the process of actually rehiring Mr. Albert, and that took place, I believe, at the end of October, when we actually signed the documents that approved an additional 4-year term for Todd. The report also describes the broader bylaw subcommittee that Scott is also leading, and I think Scott will have a presentation for us a little later on that, so I won't necessarily delve into the details of that, but we will have some material to share with you. Finally, a couple of other things briefly discussed, a process by which Todd Yufang have been working on some draft rules for facilitated dispute resolution. They have largely composed those. I think that there's perhaps a little bit more work to do on that, but Todd and Yufang will be submitting those proposed rules to the Secretary of State in 2025, and I expect that he'll get that wrapped up in the coming year. And then I made mention of 2 other items that I thought were worthy of mentioning. We have had for some time a discussion about issuing state-issued email addresses to the members of the PRAC so that all communications can be stored in a central repository. As you all know, we are public officials as a point of, because we serve on this council, and as a result, our communications are public records and do need to be maintained for a certain period of time. The idea here, and this has largely been pushed by Steve Suo, I want to give him credit for this, that we all get these state-issued email addresses so that material can be maintained and accessible to the public. And then finally, the report also mentions the need for us to do surveys of public bodies. I wanted to make mention of that because that is a statutory duty of ours. And quite frankly, we haven't done one for years. And so I wanted to highlight that as something that it's at least my intention to try to push out a survey in 2025. So with that, I don't know if anybody has any additions or if anybody's had an opportunity to review that. But what I would say, Todd, this is due to be submitted to the legislature December 1st. Is that correct?
That's right, which I believe is a Saturday. So technically we'll get it in by the 30th, hopefully sooner.
Well, at this point, I don't know whether the council is prepared to, do we need to formally adopt it, Todd? I assume we probably don't, but what I would perhaps suggest is if you haven't had an opportunity to review it, to reach out to myself and Todd to make any suggestions. We can get those incorporated prior to its submission to the legislature. Does that seem like an appropriate approach, Todd and members?
I'm fine with that. I would hope that people could get their responses or any edits in by middle of next week. And
let's set that deadline.
Okay.
Yes, Rep. Anderson, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I thought it was an excellent report, and I hope we can turn it in without very many changes. So thanks for your hard work, everybody who did this.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Scott?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Well done, Mark. I also want to thank you for basically presenting the update on the bylaws committee. I don't have anything really to add beyond what you wrote in that report. I can say a little more later, but no, well
Okay.
done, Mark. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. And then Emily, thank you.
Thanks. I thought it was great too. I had one small suggested edit that I had already identified on page 2 under legislative subcommittee work. Just that the first line of that, instead of saying that the full council approved it, that a majority of the council.
Oh, that's
approved
right,
it.
Emily, because you abstained. That's correct. Todd, can you make a note of that?
Sure, will do.
Thank you for that reminder, Emily. I do clearly remember that you did that, and I apologize for my mistake on that. And then I see Todd's hand up, please.
Yeah, I just want to say if anyone has any subsequent edits, please send them to just Mark and myself. Don't hit reply all so we could avoid any concerns about serial meetings.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Todd. And I'll lay down the gauntlet that those edits need to be turned in to Todd and myself by the close of business of Tuesday next week. Let's just set a deadline so we don't have to dawdle. All right. Is everybody comfortable with that? I just see a bunch of head nods, so we'll check off agenda item number 1. And now we'll go to the determination of official record of the Public Record Advisory Council and any subcommittee. Todd, help me interpret this. Is this our discussion about whether we need actual notes taken from our meetings? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, as you know, and Todd, you're going to probably need to be my lifeline here. As you know, we record these meetings as part of the official record. We also, and Todd, this is where I'm going to need your help. We also have automatic note taker, I guess. What's the proper way to describe this? This is where Rep. Anderson and I are the troglodytes who don't know this modern. What do you call it, Todd? Automatic note taking.
Also known as a transcript.
There you go. That's what I'm looking for.
I know that.
Yeah. So
yeah, Mark, I will say. Sorry,
ahead,
I will say just in the years that we've been meeting on Teams since the start of the pandemic, the quality and accuracy of the transcript has increased phenomenally. Perhaps that's like due to the advent of AI. And I still, when I post it, I say it's unedited, but it's a pretty close verbatim transcript of everything we say, and it identifies the speakers as well as we go.
Yes. And I will say that I did, as I was the author of the biennial report, I can tell you that I did go back and look at that transcript occasionally to pick up the nuances. Of course, I missed the nuance that Emily had abstained from that vote. But having said that, I did find it a little clunky. I will say that, and Tony, I'll recognize you here just in a quick second. I did find it a little clunky, but I also found that it was a fairly accurate representation of what took place. And so, Tony, why don't you go ahead and ask your question or make your statement, and I'm going to ask a larger question of the group here.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think we're also kind of talking about the lack of minutes over the last few meetings. So first of all, I apologize. I'm the secretary, so that's been my responsibility. And at the very last possible minute this morning, I sent Todd draft minutes for all of this year's meetings, and then December 6th, which I think catches me up. And then obviously, of course, I have no expectation of those getting approved or reviewed today. Clearly, I just because of personal circumstances,
Yep.
I just got them done today.
Fine.
And so that's just filling in the background. I'm happy to discuss moving forward, but my term does run out at the end of this year, so
Yeah.
I'll get meetings for this for
Well-
today's meetings, and then the council will definitely have to talk about moving forward.
Yeah, well, Tony, first of all, life happens, and we appreciate your participation. Your participation is always valued, and like I said, life happens. So we appreciate the work you've done.
Thanks. And I will say though, what's comforted me in not turning it in as timely as possible is because of the transcript, and the fact that the video is online. And my memory from past discussions about this topic is that both posting the video and now with the transcript, that satisfies the statute for public meetings record taking. So I think that the minutes as a document, as a PDF, a nicely polished thing is just kind of a public bonus in terms of how we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe it'll be just an easy reference, but people who really want to dive into what is discussed have either a visual or literal document to read in the transcript, which are great documents. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Tony. I agree that with Tony that we are satisfying the need for documentation of our meetings and discussions through the video as well as the transcript. I guess the real question becomes, do we feel that we need a more condensed summary of those meetings in meeting notes that Tony has been doing over the years, summarizing those meetings? I don't know if we really do, but I want to throw that out because if we determine that we do want to continue to have a secretary, we will want to add that to our bylaws. One of the things that I think we are going to need, and this is where I was going to raise an issue with Scott, is we need to list the officers probably in our bylaws as well as the terms of office in our bylaws, which I don't think we had in the initial draft, if my memory serves me correctly. So that is something that occurred to me and Todd subsequent to our last meeting, Scott, of the bylaws committee. So that's going to be an addition we'll need to make. But I want to open up this discussion as to whether or not we need a further summary. And if we determine that we don't, there's probably not a need for a secretary, right? Whereas if we do decide that we need a summary, we will likely want to include a secretary in the bylaws. I see Representative Anderson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's potentially a problem between here's the transcript and then here's the summary of things, because it may or may not, in some person's view, accurately reflect what was said and how it was said. So on one level, we're potentially asking for trouble if that happens. But if it's decided that we need it, it seems to me, and now I'm sorry, I'm talking like a lawyer, so maybe only Todd will understand me, but it may just be some head notes, Todd. You know, I mean, it comes to you as a transcript, and you say, here's what was discussed here, what was decided in a paragraph or two, because that does make it easier for the public to see it rather than slog through a whole bunch of inane comments like I just made.
Well, first of all, Representative Anderson, I'm going to add Will to your group of attorneys, okay. I believe. Okay. Number one,
Sorry, Will.
No, just want to make sure we have another attorney with us. Todd, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Well, while I don't disagree with Rep. Anderson's suggestion, I've always made a point of not volunteering to be secretary, just given the nature of my other duties. If we ultimately decide some short summarization is the best way to go, I'm happy to do it. But honestly, I'd rather not add that duty if possible. And I'm of the opinion that, yes, minutes are always good. But I do think the record we make with the video and the quality of the transcript, in my opinion, is sufficient. And I will just say our subcommittees have never used minutes. We've only ever used one, just a video when those were available. And then once the transcripts have become available, we started using those too. We've been successful. So I'm willing to give it a try without a secretary position or minutes. But if ultimately we think summarizing in a short way is best, I can live with that too.
Any strong feelings, folks? Yes, go ahead. Rep. Anderson and then Scott, please.
Okay, yeah, listen, I want to make our staff person's job as easy as possible, and I think we could more than comply if we have transcripts and video if anybody wants to see it. So I don't have any strong feelings about head notes. I just like to throw out legal terms every once in a while.
Well, we appreciate that because for us unlearned individuals, we always become brighter as a result. Scott.
Yeah, thank you. As a practitioner of public body meeting writer, it's what I do for my job here. The knee-jerk reaction from clerks across the world is you will always need written minutes. That is what the statute says. You should always do written minutes. So that's where my mind usually goes first. But having acknowledged that there's AI and that the transcripts are getting better, to what Todd said, and we do record the video, and in the industry, hearing more and more bodies from cities to Fed, all levels of government embracing AI, and reviewing the last few unedited transcripts that Todd posted, I am more comfortable, and I will not be a stick in the mud and draw a line and say that we must, as a council, have someone do summary minutes. I think it comes down to me in the spirit of the public meeting laws. It's about accessibility to what a public body is doing, right? And so for many people in 2024, watching a video is a very accessible way of doing that. But there is still accessibility and inclusivity issues in terms of having something written as well. And I feel comfortable, and I'm sensing there might be a leaning in the council at the moment, just on a limb there, but we might be okay with the transcript as it's evolving. So my knee-jerk reaction, I'll just say for the record, is we will always need written minutes, but I would be willing to go along with the transcript and the video. And I'll just observe, I don't know if we want to be on the cutting edge of this, but there was a day when it was pretty rare for a body like a city council to say, we're only going to use the video as our official record. And to my knowledge, there's only one city in our state who has declared that, and they've been on the record for that for 5 or 6 years on that at that point. But by making a stand and setting this relatively minor logistical thing today, we are kind of, to my knowledge, one of the first bodies to publicly acknowledge that. So we would be sort of cutting edge on that. So all that to say, I would be fine going along with the transcript and video.
Thank you, Scott. Tony?
Yeah, Scott, thank you. Amen. I was thinking about it and then raised my hand down, but I wanted to also endorse just the idea that with artificial intelligence, like it helped me a little bit with the last few ones that I did in terms of at least starting it and then having else. But even that takes a little bit of time to put together the minutes. And I agree also with just like relying on YouTube. I wanted just to add one more thing is that when you post something on YouTube, you can also, in the body of the text where you describe the video, you can hyperlink sections of the agenda after you post the video. So people that visit the video can click to, if they're only interested in this particular vote or a particular agenda item, you can have that in a section where they can just click on the timestamp, and then that would be a very convenient way where someone doesn't have to watch a 2.5-hour meeting if they're only interested on a particular discussion. So, and that could be, like Scott said, a cutting edge kind of way of making it easy and accessible and not as time consuming to view the agenda, the information that you're seeking if you're a member of the public or someone.
Thank you.
So anyways.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tony. Well, I'm beginning to get a sense that we're leaning in one direction. Perhaps I'll make a motion so that we can move this along. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I agree with where you're going. I don't want to disrupt the flow there, Mark. One quick question for Todd. One of the other things that has been a consideration in terms of setting video as the official record is this long-term storage, permanent storage of that video. Is there any concern administratively from retaining those videos?
No, only because I post them on YouTube under the Prax official page, and then I link to that on the Prax website. And so even though what's stored in the system initially after these meetings eventually gets deleted, the permanent version of that, or at least the version that's required to last for the length of our retention period, is on YouTube.
Okay.
So my sense is we're leaning in a direction, so I'm just going to make a motion that we consider the video and AI transcript of our meetings as sufficient for meeting minutes, and that we probably do not need a summarization of that, thereby eliminating the need for a future secretary. So Tony, you will have been the first and the last secretary of the Public Records Council. And so anyway, there is a motion on the table.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Tony. There's a second. I don't think there's going to be much disagreement, but everybody in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? All right. Well, that took care of agenda item number 2 and number 3. Thank you for that discussion. All right. Report by the Bylaws Committee. Scott, I know that the report covered it, but we did get a new direction, at least on including officers being the chair and vice chair of the Public Records Advisory Council. So we'll need a description of their duties, or I think actually you have the duties in there, but you don't have the terms of office.
Sure.
And Todd, correct me if I'm incorrect, but I think that statutorily it says that officers serve for 2 years.
I think Todd may have just, oh, there he is.
Yeah, I do have to step away for just a second, but you are correct, Mark. I had forgotten that our statute actually specifies 2-year terms for officers.
So we'll want to just include that in the bylaw as well there, Scott. Yeah. All right. So that's, I guess, Scott, did you have anything to add? We did have your name on there and I did all the talking, so I'll shut up and let you make a few remarks so I can check this one off.
I will just say thank you, Mark. Again, the summary and the annual report was spot on. I didn't have anything to add. I just wanted to say, before I forget, yes, I will update the latest version we're working on. No secretary. The terms are in there, but it's not super clear that it's terms for members, not terms of the officers. So I'll just add a little note. We can wordsmith that for the officers. And then I'll update the minutes section based on the decision the council just made to reflect what we just decided. Other than that, I entertain the idea of sharing a version of the draft minutes or bylaws with the council at this point, but I didn't want to put too many different versions floating out there since it's not final. I'm very happy to report that the bylaws subcommittee has met twice in the fall. We've made great progress. It's been a really good working group. I've appreciated the help that everyone's and the participation of everyone who's done that. We've got a draft going. We're making some edits, and we're really on track. Probably months before the next council meeting next summer, probably in the winter or early spring, to have a final draft of the bylaws. So thank you to everyone for the work on that. It's going to be very helpful, I think, to have some outline, some of the operational functions of our council. And so that was really the extent of it. I really appreciate your report, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. I just I believe, in order to be exact, I'm an ex officio member, am I not, Todd? So therefore, I can't vote on anything. So I withdraw my vote, and I'll try very hard not to vote again. But I'm here to monitor and appreciate the fantastic work you all are doing.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. All right, we're on agenda item number 5. Todd, the Advocate Training and Assistance Report, please.
Thanks, Mark. I've prepared just a short presentation. I placed it under our meeting on the website too, so you're welcome to follow along or review it later. I'll share my screen now, though. Okay, hopefully you are all seeing my screen. Great, I got a thumbs up from Mark. All right. Well, everyone, as you know, we've agreed that during our meetings, although given circumstances, it doesn't happen in every meeting, but whenever it's called for, I will provide an update on both the request for assistance the office has undertaken in the last period, as well as our trainings. When we get to the trainings, you'll see I've expanded the category a bit because I don't think the word training quite fits everything we do that is training-like, but we'll get there in a moment. So let's get started. And I can't see anyone except Mark. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to speak up or raise your hand and let Mark, hopefully you can tell me.
Yes, sir.
All right, so here's the history of our request for assistance through yesterday. As you'll see, there's definitely been a general uptick in requests that come in since the office opened its doors in April of 2018. Of course, we had a little bit of leveling off during the onset of the pandemic, but our numbers have continued to increase ever since. We ended last year at a grand total of 275 individual requests for assistance in a single year. I will break down 2024's numbers a little more in a moment. And as of yesterday, with still, at least 6 weeks to go in the year, we are already pretty close to last year's final tally for 2023, although, it's quite similar. But so the work has been holding steady. And of course, a request for assistance is a discrete ask by either a member of the public, including the media, or a public body, state or local, for assistance on a disputed public records request. It could also be other questions related to the public records law, including anticipated issues, or even through appeal and litigation. So these are the categories of information we track for each request for assistance. It's 10 categories in total, and it's been very helpful to sort of help Yufeng and I understand who's coming to us for assistance and what do those issues consist of, as well as, of course, tracking the length of time it takes to resolve those issues. So this is just a quick overview. If anyone wants to keep reading, let me know. Otherwise, I can move on to the next screen. Well, hearing nothing, let's skip ahead to some breakdown. So here are our requests for assistance just for this year, 2024, again, up through yesterday. We've had a grand total of 258 requests for assistance so far, as I mentioned. 64 of them have come from public bodies. And you'll see for each number, there's a number next to it. Those are the numbers I reported out on December 4th of last year. So since we're close in time to that date, I just wanted to give a little side-by-side comparison. So, with still a few weeks to go to December 4th, we're down slightly on requests for assistance from public bodies, but the numbers are fairly similar. So you'll see actually local governments have reached out to us the most out of governments in Oregon, followed closely by state governments. And actually we had one outreach from an attorney for a tribal government as well. And then, of course, we've received 3 times as many requests for assistance from members of the public, very similar to our numbers from last year. The media makes up 41 of those, similar to last year, and the general public has actually gone up a bit in that 153 of the requests for assistance were from members of the general public. Of course, some of these requesters from the government and the public are repeat requesters, but with new and different issues, so we count those as separate requests for assistance. Out of those 258, as of last night, we had closed 247 of them. We managed to resolve 60 of them. So what's that? No, I'm not going to do math right now. We managed to close 60 of them on the same day that they came in. And here's the range for the rest. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd say we have 6 outliers that have taken significantly longer to complete than our average number of requests. And those could be for various reasons, including waiting for information from a requester or a public body, or a lot of negotiation back and forth between the parties about records. But on average, our resolution ranges from 1 to 35 days. Again, quite similar to last year, although last year I only noted one outlier at 82 days. I don't know if that represents a trend or is statistically insignificant.
Hey, Todd, can
Yes.
I ask a question?
Please.
This is really interesting information, and I'm kind of curious about diving into it more. But one of the questions I would have is, do we know after the assistance by the advocate, whether any of these conflicts end up in litigation? Is there any way that you are able to follow that?
At this time, no. I mean, often a requester or a public body will update us and say, oh, hey, I went ahead and appealed, or, it's even gone into litigation. But, once we've rendered our assistance, it's up to
It's out
whomever
of
we're
your
working with.
hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's, in some ways, it's kind of nice. It's like being the uncle rather than the dad. Like I could be nice, have fun, fun with the issue. And then they go back to whomever has to really worry about it. But it's also can be frustrating because, yeah, I often do wonder, what's happened here, or did we do enough to help, or will we hear from them again? But it's really kind of out of our control, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just was curious about whether or not we have that ability, and I imagine we don't. But I just thought that that would be sort of an interesting angle on litigation avoidance, if you will, right?
Sure.
And whether or not this is actually in some ways helping reduce court activity, and so it's just an interesting thought on cost avoidance, if you will. Will,
Sure.
I see Will's hand up. Will?
So, obviously there are two levels to litigation in public records realm, right? You have the administrative level, and then you have the circuit court level. It's easy enough to move from the request from assistance based on the name of the individual to an e-court search at the end of the year to determine if that individual then filed suit against the public body. Now, collecting information from district attorney's offices on whether appeals were filed can be more difficult, but that can always be something that we also add in as a part of the end of the year report. District attorney's offices, I think I would have to take a look at the statute, but are supposed to provide information if requested, but I've got to look to confirm that. I thought they were part of the public body mandate.
Oh, if you're talking about the work of the PRAC, then yeah, I would say the district attorneys, because it's basically all public bodies in Oregon are supposed to provide
that's
info to the PRAC. Yeah, not my office, but to the council.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think if we want to move forward with that evaluation that you described, that Mark, then we can. We just we'd probably do it as a two-step process. Send those notes out to the district attorney's offices to follow up on reports regarding appeals that were requested on the administrative level, and then have somebody log into e-courts and just do some name searches.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd say hold on to that idea, because when we get to planning for the next year at the end of the meeting, that could be a very good project for us to work on.
Well, that was sort of the why I was leading down that question of whether or not we can actually quantify the public benefit to the work that this office does. I mean, these numbers provide a really good idea of the benefit that the office provides, but there's a data point I think that's missing, and that's what we're discussing right now. So I would agree with you, Todd, that I don't want to make more work for you and Yufeng, but at the same time, I think we need to adequately capture the impact that this office has, whether it's through the facilitated negotiations that you conduct on a regular basis, and the avoidance of court time that may result from the work that this office does. So maybe we flag that for our future discussion in the agenda.
Sounds good. That's great. Well, then just to wrap up this section, so we have an office policy that if we're communicating with a requester, whether it's a public body or a member of the public, and we haven't heard from them back from them within 30 days, we consider that request for assistance closed. That's just really for administrative purposes. If someone comes to us on the 31st or the 60th day, we're not going to refuse them assistance. But in terms of like a line item in our tracking sheet, that matter is considered closed. And so we've had 25 so far this year that became unresponsive and were considered closed after 30 days. Last year, a few weeks later than we're talking now, it was at 30. And we currently have 11 open requests for assistance, including 2 I got like late yesterday that I'm working on. And those also include those that are older, and we're hoping to hear back from the requesters so we could continue to offer assistance.
Thank you, Todd.
Sure.
Todd, could I just ask one more question? Because I am curious about local government and the requests initiated by local government. Do you have a breakdown of that? Is there a sort of a trend? Like, are you seeing more school districts, or is it cities, or is it evenly distributed?
I'd have to go back through the sheet and consider those one at a time, because in terms of record keeping, we note what type of government is, obviously contacting us, but in terms of like the numbers, we just have a column that says local government that, we check, and then in a different column put in which government that is. So for purposes of this sheet, I did the math, but I did not do the breakdown.
Understood. And I don't expect you to go back, although I do think that would be something that would be helpful in the future. Just seeing where, if we have any pinch points, right? I think that would be an interesting data set to observe as well. Any other comments on this data, folks? Please go ahead, Todd. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. I was taking note of what you said in the meantime. Okay. So here are the trainings we've conducted since after the last meeting of December of last year, where we presented this level of detail. For these, I actually do break them down. And so instead of just saying trainings, the office does so much that I consider training-like behavior, because we're still disseminating information about the nuts and bolts and best practices of the public records law to interested audiences beyond the individual requester under our RFAs. And so I've started doing something called Q&As. Sometimes we'll have 2 to 7 public employees who are interested in learning about public records issues. It's often very specific to their work. So instead of sort of the 90-minute dog and pony, PowerPoint public records training that we do for larger audiences, I like to do what are called Q&As. I give them a little preamble about what I consider the most important aspects of the public records law, and then they basically just fire questions at me for however long we're meeting about their particular issues, or they sent me their questions ahead of time and I've prepared my responses. But it's usually a pretty helpful, robust discussion that digs down to specifically the work that they're doing rather than general public records information overall. Those have been very effective, and so I've added those to this category, as well as interviews. Every year during Sunshine Week, we are interviewed by Jefferson Public Radio, and it's a great opportunity for Yufeng and I to get out a lot of information to their listeners, again, about the nuts and bolts and best practices of the public records law, and then presentations as well. So sometimes I'm asked to talk about our office, the PRAC, upcoming legislation, really specific issues within the public records law. So I've put those all together into what was formerly the training slide. And so I did do a breakdown here of the types of entities that we've provided trainings to. As you can see, the largest one at a grand total of 4 were state agencies. Our numbers are down a bit from last year when it comes to trainings. I don't know if that's, what that's due to specifically. We have never said no to a training. We're always available to help. We just haven't heard back from as many organizations or entities as we did last year. And so I believe that is it. Any questions here, though, before we come out of this slide? I don't think so. Okay.
I don't see any, Todd.
All right. Well, great. Thank you, everybody. Of course, I'm always happy to answer questions offline as well if you're reviewing this material later and anything comes up.
Great. All right. Well, I, for one, will probably be recommending to my association that we get public records training at our next annual conference. We haven't done it for a couple of years, so I'll try to pad your numbers there, Todd, in the future.
Thanks, Mark. I
Um,
will say this is the first year we weren't contacted to present at the conference, but that's okay. I didn't take it personally.
We'll get you back on the rotation here. Any questions, folks? All right, with that, we'll go to our next agenda item, and that's on the 2024 E-Board and 25-27 biennial budget build report. Todd and Yufeng.
Thank you, Mark. Yufeng has graciously agreed to take the lead since she's also been our lead person in the office working on these issues. I will be here to assist, but I'm going to throw it over to her now.
Okay, so can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Let me share and start my slides. So I have brief slides. These have also been posted in PDF format on the Pratt website from beginning. Go. Okay, so for our for the budget, the way that Todd and I have set this up is kind of comparative with the operating budget that we've had for 2023 through 2025, and then kind of a comparison with what we've asked for the upcoming budget cycle. So where we currently stand is we are funded through other funds through an assessment on other state agencies, and the breakdown of our budget is personal services and S&S, which is services and supplies. We have 2 full-time employees, and we're fully staffed at this point in time, an executive director, and which is Todd, and myself as operations and policy analyst 4. As you can see, that's the largest portion of the pie goes to funding staffing, and the remainder goes to DAS IT services, HR services, telecom, our supplies, and kind of other assessments by other agencies, and travel expenses for our trainings, and both that we give and that we receive. So comparatively, from the total budget number of $1,172,941 for the upcoming biennium 25 through 27, you see that there is, at least for what we've asked for, an increase, right? And that largely comes from kind of what we're asking for from personal services, which at this point, I think I'll kick it over to Todd to discuss both the E-Board issue and kind of our ask from the legislature.
Thanks, Yufeng. Yeah, I'll start with our ask from the legislature. This is our 3rd attempt to get 2 additional positions. One would be an office manager that handles a lot of the administrative stuff and initial contact with requesters, getting basic information about their dispute. I spent a lot of time on administrative tasks, which is fine. We're a small state agency, but it takes away from my other bread and butter duties, and has made it difficult for us to sort of expand our services into, say, like white papers, systemic analyses, going out to affinity groups and letting them know what we do and offer training. So we were hoping to sort of normalize our operations like any other state agency with administrative staff. And then also an operations policy analyst 3, which would be someone who could do some of those more deep dives into issues and help us build out the capacity of the office. It's been made clear to me that for state agencies like ours that aren't in the governor's primary areas of priority, we're being asked to keep things status quo because we are meeting our statutory duties at our current funding levels, adjusted for inflation, of course. And so therefore, it is highly unlikely we will be getting those 2 additional positions that we're asking for. Before I move on to the E-Board issue, I see Rep. Anderson has his hand up.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Todd. I was just going to recognize Rep. Anderson. Thank you. Go ahead, Representative Anderson.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate the work that you and Yufeng do, Todd. I'm just a little curious. I think the amount was $981,000 for personal service. Are you guys splitting that salary, that amount between the 2 of you, or where does it all go? Says the
I get
man
about
who makes.
95%. 5% goes to Yufeng, but she's happy to
Okay,
be
yeah,
here.
that's
No,
how it should
it's
be. Yeah, yeah.
where it's just the nature that it's just the nature of the beast. We're both at the top scale for our positions, and then of course about holistic benefit services like healthcare, et cetera. I mean, I don't even know what the true breakdown of that is, except I know it's exactly what it costs to employ both of us. There's nothing else in there beyond
I
that.
don't have any objection to that at all. That's what I figured it was. There's the standard salary, and then when you add benefits and everything else on top of it, that's where we come. So that's fine. Thank you very much.
And
Thank you.
Tony.
Yeah, just a quick question. I guess if there's ever, I understand that you said Todd about the status quo and chances of the additions not being approved, but I'm wondering whenever there is a good time for the increase in staffing and stuff, I hope you also consider some sort of line item for communications as well, in terms of not for like an actual person, but I just with if I did the math right, like almost 60% of the requests for services come from the general public. According to your report, there's clearly an interest there for information. And I don't know if having a more visually appealing website with informations or like sample presentations or trainings that you do, like the stock dog and pony show you were talking about, that could be easily accessible. That might reduce some of the workload that you do, or it might increase it. But just you could probably figure out like maybe some sort of like marketing agency or something to create that stuff as a one-time project, like a website and a fancy video or something, or like just to whatever materials you have, make it into something shiny and nice for the general public. I think that would go a long way. So anyways, I just wanted to mention it.
Thank you, Tony. I wholeheartedly agree. And you're right about that being a line item, because we got creative for a couple summers and used remaining discretionary funds to hire an intern to get a little extra work done. And then we were told that's a no, we can't do that anymore. So unless it's specified in the budget, we're not supposed to be doing it. And so you're right. That's a good idea to think about for a future budget build. And thank you, Stephanie, for pointing out that, of course, these numbers represent 2 years, not just one. So we're not exactly living high on the hog here. We're just getting paid, of course. And then as far as the e-board goes, so this is interesting. Apparently for positions in state government, when they're vacant and they're being hired for, they're all budgeted at step 2, regardless of how likely you are to hire somebody at that step. And, we're fortunate to hire Yufeng as the Deputy Public Records Advocate, and she came in at a much higher step due to her experience in education, but the position for this biennium was still only budgeted at step 2, which means as we approach the end of this biennium, we're actually facing a shortfall of $40,000 to fund the remainder of Yufeng's salary. And so we will be going, the date keeps getting pushed back, but I've been assured we still have enough money in the budget to meet Yufeng's salary until we get to this point, but we will be going during an early part of the upcoming legislative session to request the remainder of that salary for 23-25. And then, of course, in the 25-27 budget, her salary is fully funded, so it isn't an issue. So we just have to get over this last hump administratively, but apparently that's quite standard, and so we are not concerned. So if anyone, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to Yufeng to finish up.
Just pausing to see if there are any questions. But that actually concludes our budget report. The remainder of the slide goes right into kind of the next agenda item. So I will temporarily stop sharing to see if there's any discussion or questions.
Any questions, comments? All right. Well, Yufeng, let's go to agenda item number 7, the Facilitated Dispute Resolution Process Administrative Rule.
Okay, so this is kind of where we are. Well, let me just give some background. So the Office of the Public Records Advocate The statute empowers the advocate to create kind of a rules process that guides the formal facilitated dispute resolution process. That's also kind of outlined with fairly good detail in the statute. Now, the rules that we've already drafted and are in the process of formalizing, the subpoints here are kind of what those rules are designed to clarify. So we will live in OAR Chapter 180, and the set of rules we're proposing kind of just gives kind of basic procedural guide rails, rules governing future adoption of rules and amendment or repeal of permanent rules. It'll also formally adopt kind of the model rules of procedure that DOJ puts out, so that we're kind of in line officially with what other agencies, what their administrative processes are. A key part of the OAR is kind of defining parties who can receive formal facilitated dispute resolution services, which is just by kind of contrast and clarification, kind of what we receive and the work that we do in response to requests for assistance. That is a form of dispute resolution, right? We are performing tasks that sometimes require mediation between any state or municipal body and a member of the media or a member of the general public. So we can do that work. But kind of separate from that is this, what's formally kind of coined as facilitated dispute resolution, that's enshrined in the statute, that is supposed to have more of a kind of formal flavor to it, and which up until now hasn't really been formally requested by the eligible parties who can request it. So part of the rules are about defining with good clarity kind of which parties can formally request that form of dispute resolution, and also outlining the procedure governing that facilitated dispute resolution. And that would include kind of what the request submission process would look like, as well as what the timelines for the advocate's response and for parties' response and for the availability of remedies, what that would be like. This will also include, the set of rules will also include standards of conduct, as well as kind of a clarification of the remedies available and appeal options, as well as confidentiality rules governing this form of dispute resolution. Okay, question?
Yeah, actually, I do. So, Yufeng, the confidentiality issue. So, obviously, we're a public records advisory council, and we're talking about confidentiality here. Could you perhaps explain a little bit further on that, at least so that the public can understand why that exists?
Right. So, in general, for mediation that occurs in Oregon, there are certain other OARs, other rules and statutes that may govern some confidentiality around those discussions, right? And there's this form of mediation. There is also, and we can kind of break that down and discuss that in greater detail, possibly at a future meeting where we can talk about those contours. But that confidentiality is just to clarify, well, what are the eligible parties' rights with respect to those discussions under statute? I mean, what confidentiality do we have to maintain in the course of providing these services? That said, there's, of course, this I guess conflict between, well, this is public records we're dealing with, right? This is a discussion of these are public records. This process should be as transparent as it can be by design and in spirit with the public records laws. So we've kind of thought through that as well and tried to maintain a balance there between what we're required to do, any confidentiality that we're required by law to maintain, versus what we're endeavoring to do to increase transparency of process.
Yeah, thank you for that, Yufeng. I just wanted to, I think, highlight the point that there are statutory guidelines for these types of discussions, right? And that's not that you're not trying to hide the ball here, right?
Right.
That's the point here. So thank you, Todd. I see your hand up.
Oh yeah, just to add to what's being said. So when our statute was drafted, whomever drafted this section made our ADR subject to ORS Chapter 36, the chapter on mediation that comes with confidentiality baked into it. There's some wiggle room and some discretion, so of course we'll always err towards the side of disclosure to the extent possible, but we will also honor the wishes of the parties engaged in the resolution process with us. And so actually now that gets me thinking that we should probably figure out, well, this is probably more about the forms we use, but we'll have a section where they could check their interest in confidentiality to the extent that we could guarantee it.
Thank you for that clarification. Sorry for the interruption, Yufeng.
No, appreciate the questions. Okay, so in terms of next steps and a timeline to where we're going. So the proposed rule in its current kind of draft format is basically complete, right? And a version of the draft was kind of sent off to the PRAC August 2023 for courtesy kind of review. And we got some feedback from, I think, one of the members of the public and kind of some questions from the body. So we've done some, minor adjustments, and now the form of this draft is going to be taken to the next step, which will be to prepare a notice of proposed rulemaking, complete the necessary fiscal impact documents, and to submit that draft form to the Secretary of State, which will probably happen in March of next year. And once that happens, it kicks off kind of a notice process as well. Specified legislators, the agency mailing list, the Secretary of State's bulletin, as well as, I think in our own rules, we are going to send off notice to kind of media entities as well, right? And a broad kind of body of stakeholders, because the idea is we want to set time, and we're required to set time for a rulemaking hearing and for adequate time for members of the public to provide their commentary and to have oral and written comments. I will note that the rulemaking hearing, right, while it may be kind of one day set aside, there is further time beyond that to receive written and oral commentary from members of the public and from interested stakeholders. So once we receive that, we will consider and address those concerns and prepare kind of a final form of the rule based on those considerations. And once that happens, that final permanent rule filing gets prepared and submitted to the Secretary of State. Kind of the model process for this that I've taken a look at is it can take, like at its quickest timeline, kind of 6 months to go from preparing that notice of proposed rulemaking down to the final permanent rule filing. Of course, there can be any number of I don't want to say obstacles, but things that may increase that time period. But where we're currently sitting at, we're looking at finalizing this set of rules and having it permanently on file before the end of next year.
Great. Are there any questions? I guess my only question would be this. You've been doing facilitated dispute resolution up to this point without this. So this is more of a sort of a confirmation of your practice, just setting it into its proper, shall we say, bureaucratic shelf. This just formalizes what you've been largely doing up to this point, I would gather, correct?
I would say yes and no. Definitely yes, because yes, we mediate all the time, and but this is part of the right sizing as we continue to evolve as a standard state agency. But also know, because interestingly enough, I would say that all the mediation we've done to date is more an exercise of our soft power or shuttle diplomacy. No one has been compelled to participate, nor have we made the limited type of findings that we're able to. Of course, facilitated dispute resolution is still just mediation by a different name. It's a conversation between parties where you try to come to a common understanding that you can commit to writing. But this process in statutes, it's a little more formal and a little more adversarial than what we do now. But interestingly enough, in talking to colleagues in other states, the few other states that have similar authority, they're much more likely and more often using the soft power like we do than this formal authority, because once you move into this more formal area, parties break down into their individual camps. It's more antagonistic. They're less willing to come to some sort of compromise. But nevertheless, we have these authority, and at some point, it will be appropriate to use it rather than our soft power. So yes, Mark, we want to take everything we've learned from our informal mediation and use it to inform a rule for when we actually exercise this stronger authority.
So if I can perhaps summarize, then you use the soft shoe approach at the beginning, and if necessary, you will deploy this approach when and if necessary. Is that a fair way to describe it? Both parties, though, would have to agree to enter into this. Is that a fair summation?
Yes. With state agencies, we have a little bit more of a hook than a carrot. We can more or less tell them they have to, although they can still choose not to participate. And based on why they're doing that, I can make a finding of bad faith against them. Cities may opt into this, although bad faith findings can't be made against them, and no other government in Oregon is subject to this provision. So it only applies to state agencies in the executive branch, cities if they want to, and that's it.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any questions? And let me perhaps describe the history, because in 2017, when the PRAC was created, this was applied, this facilitated dispute resolution was applied to just the state, and cities also volunteered. Okay. I can tell you that the special districts, the counties, the school districts weren't necessarily opposed to participating, but wanted to see whether the canary survived the coal mine, so to speak. Now that this is sort of becoming more, shall we say, formalized, I still think the jury's out for whether or not those other entities want to join. Maybe that's a discussion for us at a future time. I don't know. I don't know whether my clients would be excited to do that, but maybe that's a discussion that we have in the future. Because again, this does not capture all levels of government at this in our state. So I just want to point that out. Yufeng and Todd, thank you for that. Are there any questions? Okay, I don't see any. We're making some good progress. Why don't we go to agenda item number 8? Just doing a quick time check. We've got 45 minutes. I still want to be able to get to the public if we have any folks from the public today. So why don't we go ahead and go to key performance measures, Todd? Thank you. And thank you, Yufeng, for that report.
And Mark, just to your last point, yeah, we've been very lucky in that I've never had a public body refuse to talk to us, even if it's just a quick response to why they think they did what they should have. They're always willing to provide some sort of answer to us, even though they're not required to. And I certainly don't show up with a big stick. I usually let any public body that's not within our jurisdiction know that they don't have to talk to us if they don't want to, but that I offer our services. And it's gone really well so far, as you can see by our numbers.
Yeah. And I just, again, wanted to provide a little bit of historic background on why that occurred.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to KPMs or key performance measures. I'm sharing my screen again. You should be seeing a large spreadsheet. So what are key performance measures and why are we talking about them? Well, in 23-25, that is the first biennium in which our office actually advocated for and now controls its own budget rather than being held and administered by DAS. As part of that budget build, we learned that every state agency has to create, as part of its budget, what are known as key performance measures, which are usually tied to its core duties as a way of taking action to demonstrate that you are in fact meeting your statutory duties during a given biennium. So this past biennium, the presentation to the legislature about our KPMs was that we now know that they exist and we're required to have them, and we will work with stakeholders in the Legislative Fiscal Office and DAS CFO's office to create them. With this next biennium, when we present our budget, we will be able to say that we've now worked with those partners as required and created 4 KPMs that are tied to our statutory duties and also incorporate 1 KPM that's a requirement of all boards and commissions in Oregon. So we could start with that one since it relates directly to the PRAC, and then I could talk about the other 3 that are specific to my office. And again, please ask me any questions throughout.
Todd, would you mind, can you perhaps magnify these? Because
Sure.
I'll need an electron microscope to read it.
Sorry, on my side, yeah, no, thank you, Marcus. For me, it looks normal sized, so I
Yeah.
didn't know how it's coming across for you guys. So I'll just
That's
scroll.
probably sufficient right there.
What about one down? Is that okay?
No, if you could, there you go. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. So all boards and commissions. So I'm sorry, let's talk about KPM number 2. This is the one specific to the PRAC. It's the Public Records Advisory Council's best practices. All boards and commissions are required to do an annual self-assessment. So we've been out of compliance for how many years is it? 6 years now. But we're supposed to do an annual assessment survey of all council members using 15 required questions. So I'm going to stop there and jump to the questions. And I'll make that larger, although then I'll have to scroll so you can see them. And a lot of them actually relate to a board's oversight of the agency it connects to. So you'll see there's things like the executive director's performance expectations are current, the executive director receives annual feedback, etc. And so this is going to become a guiding document that I think will help the council and my office continue to build and enhance our relationship around these points that are required to be answered. Like for instance, because I just had a Director 360 review in order to be reappointed to my 4-year term, but I've never had an annual review like I've had in every other pretty much every other position I've ever held. But if we're going to meet compliance with this survey that we have to do, we'll have to start instituting stuff like that. And I suppose as a council, we'll have to decide, is that something that's just between the advocate and the chair and the chair and vice chair, or the advocate and the entire council? So things like that. So I'm just going to scroll down so you can see the other questions. And of course, this is available under our meeting for today, so you could read through the questions as well. Board members act in accordance with their roles as public representatives. The board coordinates with others where responsibilities and interests overlap. Maybe some of this isn't appropriate and we just answer not applicable or yes or no. But these are the types of questions that we're required to start asking ourselves as members of the council and then answering. So just going back to this KPM. So obviously the target is all current members of the Public Records Advisory Council. In this case, our ex officio members will get to vote and participate in this. We'll do it once a year over email. And what we're going to report out is what is the percentage of best practices that are being met by the council. Let's talk for a minute about these dates. So these KPMs are meant to be answered annually. They don't have to start at the beginning of a calendar or fiscal year. And they have goals in terms of how successful we hope to be. So the goal here is 100%. Now that is not 100% that we are meeting best practices, but rather that we have 100% participation from council members. So I'm putting this in your ear now. When it comes time to answer this survey, please work hard to do so by the date that it'll be required to be reported out. And I've set this date that will begin April of next year. If you see the dates, the start dates. Oh, sorry.
Todd,
Go ahead, Mark.
I apologize.
No, it's all right.
No, this is really good. I presume that I'm going to be relying upon you and Yufeng to ensure that when that start date kicks, you'll be pushing that information out to the members of the council.
Absolutely.
Okay. I want to make sure that we've got somebody's eye constantly on these so that we can fulfill our reporting duties, right?
Absolutely. And that's in part why you'll see that each of these starts on a different month, because it's my responsibility to get these going, and Yufeng will be on leave for some time, so I'll be back to being on my own for quite a while. And so I just wanted to make sure my dates were realistic and that I'll be able to make them happen in a timely fashion. So yes, so by prior to April, you'll be hearing from me about the start of the survey, and we might even need a meeting to talk through what the questions are and what they mean, Mark. But then we'll get it out and get started in April on that one. And that is the only one that's specific to the PRAC and is required.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the other 3 key performance measures for our office, again, they're built around our core duties of mediating disputes and offering trainings. For the KPM number 1, this is also another requirement. This one is a requirement for state agencies, which is a customer service survey. This one contains 6 questions that we're going to ask of those who receive our services. And I'm going to jump to those questions now. Make it bigger. So it's about timeliness, ability, helpfulness, knowledge and expertise, availability of information, and overall quality of service. So of course, we're hoping for, favorable answers, but of course, this will continue to point the way to where we can improve our services as we start to collect these answers. Jumping back to the KPM, again, of course, so we're going to send the survey to both public bodies that receive our services and members of the public. We're going to do it via email through a random sampling of our services, making sure that we still have a nice spread amongst governments and public bodies. And what we'll be reporting on is the percent of customers rating their satisfaction with us as good or excellent. I hope to start that in March. And, trying to be realistic, but also being aspirational for 2026, we're hoping we get basically an 80% favorable rating. And by 2027, we get that up to 90%. And if not, again, that'll continue to point the way to where we can improve services. Next is mediation efficiency. This is an internal diagnostic that we will be working on, which is tracking the number of days from when we receive a request to when we offer resolution. And of course, resolution doesn't necessarily mean of the disputed public records request. It's rather that we've completed our interaction with the requester, giving them all that we can in that instance. And of course, this will be tracking mine and Yufeng's numbers, utilizing our current tracking sheet. Since we already have that tracking sheet, this will formally begin in January. And I've set a pretty high bar of completing the majority of requests for assistance within 7 days. And by 2027, hopefully 5 days. Time will tell if that's realistic or if we have to adjust these based on just the realities of the work that we do, including often waiting for people to get back to us with information. But our goal is to get these as completed in as timely a manner as possible.
Todd, do you think that is a realistic goal, given that we do see the number of requests for this office's services trending higher? Mm-hmm. Also noting that, I recognize that you're hopeful to, at some point in the future, get 2 more live bodies in your office. I just wonder if that is perhaps too aggressive of a goal to considering the limitations and the amount of work that is being requested of your office. I'm not asking you to change it. I'm just asking whether or not you think that's a realistic goal. Look, I'm all for shooting for the stars and hitting the wood pile, but if we can shoot for the stars and maybe hit the moon, which is a bit more of a realistic goal, I'm all for it. My point here is that you've got limited resources, limited staff, yet the amount of work that is being asked for this office to do seems to be on the uptick. That's all I'm saying.
No, I think that's reasonable, Mark. And prior to preparing the report for the council today, I would have said, "Oh, I think we're trending in this direction." And then actually looking at the numbers, I started to get a little worried. And I did have it in the back of my head to reach out to the Legislative Fiscal Office to discuss this particular KPM, to see, what we should be doing here, if we should be a little more closer to reality now that I have these numbers for this year in hand. So yeah, it's worth thinking about for sure.
That's all I'm saying is just, strive for improvement, but be realistic. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, Mark. I really do. Okay, and then the fourth KPM is training effectiveness, because of course that's a big part of what we do as well. And the goal here, or the target, is the percentage, or what we'll be looking for is the percentage of training participants who said yes to, did the training provide you with relevant and useful best practices for processing and responding to public records requests? And of course, that's going to go out to whomever receives our trainings. And my goal is to, for the trainings in person, of course, hand out maybe a hard copy version, but also create an online version. And we could even provide a QR code at those trainings, as well as the online ones, in addition to a link to make it easiest for participants to fill out. And what we'll be reporting on is the percentage who in fact said, yes, it was relevant and useful. And I hope to get that started in February. And the goal is 85% satisfaction for 2026, going up to 90% in 2027. I do think those are realistic numbers, just given the feedback we've received to date. And of course, again, if we don't hit those goals, well, then that'll be very important feedback to see what are we missing in our trainings that recipients need to make them better. So that is the KPMs. But before I get out of the screen, please let me know if there are any more questions.
Todd, so
yes.
This office is LFO is only requiring 4 KPMs. Is that correct?
Yes, for 2 reasons. One, it's centered around core duties. And of course, these are our core duties. And also, kind of like what you were saying about the mediation timeline, they want us to be realistic and not overextend ourselves with too many KPMs. We're not like DHS that has so many different divisions, et cetera. So yeah, smaller public bodies apparently tend to trend towards around 4. And so we're in line with them.
Well, I've shared my sort of reaction, Todd, about setting realistic expectations. Are there any other comments that folks would like to provide? All right. Well, I think that's good work, Todd and Yufeng. I know that this is important for the budget process, and the Ways and Means folks always look at these KPMs and drill down into them. So, I'm glad to see that we're finally setting some expectations through the budgetary process, and I think that these are good ones to have. So that's my reaction anyway. Anything else? All right, thank you for that. We're going to go to the PRA and Public Records Policy. This is one of my folks. I'll share with you that Todd and Yufeng have had a shall we say a policy in mind, and have been following that policy in their own minds. But one of the things that we have talked about quite a bit during the ideas surrounding reducing fees for public records was this concept that a public body could not charge fees for a public record unless they had a public records policy that was either posted or accessible to anybody who wishes to look at it. Well, knowing that the Public Record Advocate's Office is also a public body, thought that it might be wise for us and the PRA to have a public records policy. And so, Todd, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, as you so rightly pointed out, we ourselves are in violation of the current statutory requirement to have a publicly posted public records policy. And so I will be getting that up in the near future. So today I was just going to describe what that would be in very short fashion, very quick fashion, because the policy is required to state who the record custodian is or who the custodians are, the means for submitting public records requests, and the manner of assessing and charging fees. So I will be the custodian of both the my office and the PRACS records. In fact, by statute, the advocate is the custodian of the PRACS records. The channels will be that a requester can submit a public records request through our online portal, through our general email address, and through a physical address. And of course, those will all be noted in the policy and on our website. And we've received a grand total, as far as I know, of perhaps 5 public records requests since the inception of this office and the council, 4 of which have been from the same 2 requesters. My goal is to not charge any fees except for a particularly large or onerous request that dominates one or both of our times. But so we will still indicate that fees are possible, and following the current case law, essentially of saying that the lowest compensated employee capable of performing each part of a public records request should be the rate at which you charge. I've given this some thought, and we will charge at Yufeng's rate because there's only 2 of us, and she is compensated at a lower rate than me, although honestly, she probably shouldn't be. And so, again, I intend to never charge if possible, but if we do, it'll be at her hourly rate, or I should say the hourly rate of the class and comp that she currently occupies. So any questions or advice about that?
And so the intention here, folks, I'm not going to ask for a formal approval of the policy because I think we're probably all satisfied with what Todd described. Are there any concerns? Let me start with that. Are there any concerns with what Todd described? I don't see any. So Todd, my recommendation is, rather than having to bring this policy back for approval, that we just give Todd and Yufeng the permission to go ahead and implement that policy at the time that, well, as soon as possible and without unreasonable delay. How's that?
Will do.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that, Todd. I when I thought about that, I kind of got I turned very white, shall we say. All the color in my face had flushed out. So I'm glad we're going to get this little detail fixed. All right. So with that, we are now at goal setting time, and I think that this is an important item. I listed 2 things in our biennial report. One of them was a goal to perhaps shift to a state email address so that our interactions can be withheld or categorized or put in the record so that that can be accessed at future times and dates. I also want to ensure that we do one of our statutory requirements, and that will be, of course, surveying public bodies. I think that that's an agenda item, Todd, that I'd like to put on our next meeting agenda, is to begin thinking about what our next survey should be. Should it be on timeliness and response times? Usually that's the survey we did, I think it was in gosh, 2018. I mean, this is how long it's been since we've had a survey. So, Todd, one of the things what we might want to do is get a copy of the previous survey that we did, and maybe make that an agenda item for discussion at our next meeting, if that seems reasonable to everybody. I do want to get a survey out this year because that is one of our statutory requirements. We haven't done so in at least 5 years, at least that's my recollection. So I do think that that's something we need to have a discussion about and get something put out. So at this point, what I'd like to do is sort of open the floor. Of course, I think we're going on the, our goal is to, another goal is to finish our bylaws. I think that that's going to be easily achievable, but I think we should document the fact that that is one of our goals to complete. With that, I'm going to zip it and see if other folks have suggestions, recommendations, ideas about further goal setting for this body. Now, before you do so, I want to remind everybody that this body does not only has to meet once every 6 months, Todd, or once a year, right? Is it 6 months? 6 months. So mind you, we don't have to meet very often, but at the same time, I'm not adverse to meeting, so long as we have business to conduct, right? I don't want us to meet for meeting's sakes. So at some point, I do think that we're going to want to have a discussion about our goals that we have listed to see what is realistic to do within the times that we have available, right? Noting that some of us are going to be involved in what is called a legislative session that's going to last for 160 days. Thank you, Representative Anderson. I'll be spending quite a bit of time with Rep. Anderson and his 89 other colleagues. So my availability is going to be somewhat limited. I imagine that there are going to be a few others that are also impacted. Todd, please.
Well, along those lines, Mark, I just wanted to say if our legislative concept that we've been so slowly cooking actually becomes a bill, we'll probably want to meet to discuss that and decide as a council if we're going to endorse it and set up testimony and all that good stuff too.
Yeah, and I think that that's personally, I don't know if that's a goal, but I think it would be a role that we play regardless of whether or not it's a goal. But I'm certainly open to including that as one, so long as the white smoke comes out of the chimney. And by the way, if you haven't seen Conclave, I highly recommend it. All right, goals. Come on, people. You want something.
Well, I certainly echo the importance of documenting that we're going to adopt bylaws next year. And then I'm nowhere near the legislative expert, but I suppose we'd want to get back to having that legislation discussion that we had pretty actively a year ago. But I don't have a general concept or proposal to make on that front, but we took a year off from that, it kind of feels like this year, and we were working on other things.
Yeah.
But
well, I'll tell you, there are 10 people who have, as I described earlier, have been meeting on a weekly basis for 2 hours, and it's been an interesting discussion. Let's just leave it at that.
Sure.
Tony?
Yeah, I don't really have much of a dog in the hunt for this discussion. My term ends, but I wanted to just bring up that there's been a lot of work on that legislative process, and so I'm not sure if we're like the purpose of this goal setting is to like have a full list or of anything, but my suggestion or hope is that work continue. Just that in terms of the council discussing it, from my memory. I believe it was Michael Crone, who's not here, had some discussions about it and with you guys, and so it seems like, and plus with all the VP meetings that you guys are doing, it'll be an important part of the work for next year. So I don't know if it belongs in our goals or whatever, but I think I think it would be awesome just to have like as a written something the goal of finishing that legislative work or just be accounting to it somehow. But I don't know. Yeah, anyways, just good night to that.
Hey, thank you, Tony. You know, on reviewing legislation, typically the legislature doesn't come to us for feedback on their bills, quite honestly. We have had, and you know, as we all know, and as I have been reminded a couple of times, you know, they're the policy making body, and we're just advisory. And I think when the legislation was originally enacted, the idea was to run various bills by the PRAC for their input. Well, that hasn't really panned out, shall we say. We have had, though, in the past, members of various bodies. I remember the Secretary of State's office in 2020, prior to the 23 session, brought a bill related, I think, to historical
tribal cultural value.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
That they sought our input and our support for. We did give our support for that bill, if I recall correctly, Stephanie. And so I'm a little curious whether or not we might also consider some bylaws for consideration of legislation. I don't know if that's something we need to do, but I would that might be another bylaw topic that we want to consider. I'll just throw that out because we really don't have a formalized process of reviewing bills. And I don't think we've really talked about that. That might be another agenda item that we want to discuss and perhaps set up more of a formalized process. I'm open to suggestions on that. Sounds like everybody's ready for lunch.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of us missing, so I wonder if there's a way to like maybe survey folks that aren't here. That way they can. And I don't, you know, I don't know how it works with like public open meetings and stuff like that. But since there are like half of us here, I do wonder what other folks would have to say about it. So what that's for.
Emily.
I think maybe we're just being quiet because nobody objects or disagrees with what you're saying.
Well, I appreciate that affirmation. I feel a little bit over my skis a bit. You know what? I think this is a topic that we ought to discuss at our next meeting. By then, we'll probably be thick into the session itself. I have no objections to anybody approaching the PRAC and asking what we think about a bill. In fact, I certainly appreciate that opportunity, but I don't think that there's anything that requires us to review legislation and provide input. So perhaps we need to have a little bit further of a discussion as to how we're going to deal with this. Representative Anderson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would be, you know, I am a member of the legislature and I will be a member of the legislature. So I'm just asking both you as the chair and also Todd as the staffer of this committee, if there is in fact something that you think you might be able to weigh in on any legislation that is coming before the House of Representatives or the Senate, just let me know and I'll see what I can do. You know, I presume I will be reappointed as vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, which I think is where a lot of these items will come through. So I'd be happy to involve you in the discussion as much as I can.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate that very much. All right. Well, I think we may be wanting to add this as an agenda item for our next meeting, just to have a discussion. Todd, if I recall correctly, in past, you folks have provided a list of public records proposals when we have met. I can certainly assist in that. I've got a bill tracking system that I can pull up most of the public records related bills, but as folks know, oftentimes exemptions will be buried very deep into a bill that is 100 pages long. I'm not necessarily going to pick that off or pick that up, at least at first glance. But yes, Todd, go ahead.
Well, yeah, that is every legislative session. That is an aspirational goal of this office, to search through every bill, because you're right, a lot of these exemptions are buried. And so it will be my goal again. I probably will need more help than usual because, like I said earlier, I will be on my own doing our daily duties, the admin stuff, and rolling out the KPMs. Plus, it's Sunshine Week in March, and I'm hoping to try to do something and have the hearing for our administrative rule during that period too. So yes, anyone that becomes aware of any public records bill or related bill, please send it my way so I can hopefully keep a list going.
And Todd, just know I've got a tracking system. You can lean on me if you need backup on that. All right. With that, are there any other goals that we want to set, folks? Not really hearing much. We have a lot of work ahead of us still. So I think that we're probably pretty well set for goals at this point. Anything else to add for the good of the order on goals? I'll give it 5 seconds. All right, folks, we are now at the point of public comment. Are there any members of the public present? And if so, are there any members of the public that would like to address the council? All right, hearing none. Anything else for the good of the order, folks?
Yes, I just wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, please, Todd.
Which is, I just wanted to extend my deep gratitude to Tony as, for his service as a member of the public, or as a member of this council representing the public. Tony, you've been on this council longer than I've been in the office. Your contribution has been immense. I think you've always kept us grounded and realistic about our work, but also always urged us to strive to do more and to reach out to more people and to make our work more inclusive. I hope the person that comes behind you to fill this role is as interesting and interested in our work, but I won't forget what you've done here, and you've made my transition to this role a lot easier. I've always appreciated your guidance and support. You'll be missed, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate your work.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a great ride and amazing work by everyone, and an honor. So I appreciate everything. I wish you all the best.
Let the wind be in your sails. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the second. Everybody, I don't see any objections. We'll consider ourselves adjourned. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and go Ducks. Sorry, I had to say it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.